Dizzy by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Dizzy was, to be quite honest, not very clever. If you were to ask Mr. Dizzy what was the opposite of black, he'd say, the opposite of black is, pink. He lived in a house on a hill which he'd built himself. A not very clever house. One of Mr. Dizzy's problems was that he lived in a country where everyone else was terribly clever. Cleverland. Even the birds were clever in Cleverland. Everything and everybody in Cleverland was clever. You'll never see a worm reading a book anywhere else but Cleverland. Poor Mr. Dizzy. Everything around him was so clever it made his head spin. One morning Mr. Dizzy was out for a walk when he met a pig. "What's big and grey and has big ears and a trunk?" said the clever pig to Mr. Dizzy. A mouse?" said Mr. Dizzy. The pig laughed sarcastically at Mr. Dizzy and went off shaking his head. Then Mr. Dizzy met an elephant, a clever elephant. "What's small and furry and likes cheese?" the elephant asked cleverly. A pig?" replied Mr. Dizzy. The clever elephant laughed down his trunk. "A pig?" he trumpeted. "A pig, you silly man," and off he went. Poor Mr. Dizzy. Mr. Dizzy decided he didn't want to talk to anybody else that day, so he went for a walk in the wood, where he knew that he wouldn't meet anybody. He felt very miserable about not being clever, and as he walked along, a tear trickled down his cheek. Poor Mr. Dizzy. Then, in the middle of the wood, he came across a well. Little did Mr. Dizzy know that it was a wishing well. The day was warm, and so he decided to take a drink of water from the well. Mr. Dizzy drank deeply, but he was still unhappy. "Oh, I wish I could be clever," he sighed. Little did Mr. Dizzy know that whoever drinks deeply from the water at the wishing well, his wish will come true. And Mr. Dizzy had wished that he could be clever. And his wish had come true. He was clever, but he didn't know it. Not yet. On the way home, Mr. Dizzy came across the elephant and the pig he had met earlier. They were telling each other about how they had made Mr. Dizzy look silly by asking him a question he couldn't answer. They were giggling and sniggering about it when they saw Mr. Dizzy approaching from the wood. "Here he comes again," giggled the clever pig. "Let's ask him another question," sniggered the clever elephant. Mr. Dizzy came up to them. "Tell us," said the clever pig, trying to keep a straight face. "What's white and woolly and goes baa?" "Why, a sheep, of course," replied Mr. Dizzy. The pig and the elephant were amazed. To tell the truth, so was Mr. Dizzy. He suddenly felt very, very clever. It was not an unpleasant feeling. "Tell us," said the clever elephant, "what has 4 legs, a tail, and goes woof?" "How easy," replied Mr. Dizzy. "A dog, of course." The clever pig and the clever elephant couldn't understand how Mr. Dizzy had become so clever in one morning. Mr. Dizzy couldn't understand how he had become so clever in one morning. But we know how he'd become so clever in one morning, don't we? "Now let me ask you a question," said Mr. Dizzy to the pig. "You?" grunted the pig rudely. "You ask me a question? Don't be ridiculous. There's no question you could ask me that I couldn't answer. Really? Smiled Mr. Dizzy. Well then, can you tell me what's fat and pink and goes, Hachoo! Hachoo! What's fat and pink and goes, Hachoo! Hachoo! Repeated the pig, looking worried. There's nothing that's fat and pink and goes, Hachoo! Hachoo! Nothing, eh? Said Mr. Dizzy, and he tickled the pig's nose. Hachoo! Hachoo! Sneezed the pig. The answer is you, said Mr. Dizzy. You're fat and pink, and you're going hachoo! Hachoo! The clever pig looked downright, if not down left, miserable. Mr. Dizzy turned to the elephant, who incidentally had stopped sniggering. Now, said Mr. Dizzy, let me ask you a question. What's large and grey and goes doppet, doppet? What's large and grey and goes doppet, doppet? Repeated the elephant, looking worried. There's nothing that's large and grey and goes doppet, doppet. Oh, yes, there is, grinned Mr. Dizzy. There certainly is something that's large and grey and goes doppet, doppet, and he tied a knot in the clever elephant's trunk. Doppet, doppet, cried the elephant, who wanted to say stop it, but couldn't talk properly with a knot in his trunk. Mr. Dizzy grinned and went home. I suppose do think that's funny, said the elephant. I hope you'll join me for another story. Mr. Impossible by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Impossible could do the most amazing things. For instance, Mr. Impossible could jump over a house. You try it. It's impossible. And Mr. Impossible could make himself invisible. All he had to do was stand there and think about becoming invisible. And he became invisible. You try it. It's impossible. And Mr. Impossible could fly. All he had to do was stand there and flap his arms about, and off he flew. You try it. It's impossible. And Mr. Impossible lived in an impossible-looking house. Have you ever seen a house in such an impossible place? Of course not. One day, Mr. Impossible was out walking in the woods when he met a boy named William. William was on his way to school. Hello, said Mr. Impossible. Hello, replied William. I'm William. I'm impossible, said Mr. Impossible. Really? Said William. Really? Smiled Mr. Impossible. Can you do impossible things? Asked William. Haven't come across anything I can't do, replied Mr. Impossible modestly. William thought. Can you climb up that tree? He asked, pointing to the biggest tree in the wood. I can do better than that, replied Mr. Impossible. I can walk up that tree. And he did. William thought again. Can you stand on one hand? He asked. I can do better than that, replied Mr. Impossible. I can stand on no hands. And he did. That's impossible, cried William. True, replied Mr. Impossible. Then William remembered that he was on his way to school. Why don't you come with me? He asked. But I've never been to a school before, Mr. Impossible said. Then it's time you did, replied William. Come on. William and Mr. Impossible sat at the back of William's classroom with all the other children. The teacher came in, but didn't notice that there was somebody extra in his class that morning. "Good morning, children," said the teacher. "I have a very difficult sum for you to do today. It will take you most of the morning to work out the answer." And he wrote the sum on the blackboard. It really was the most difficult sum William had ever seen in his whole life, full of multiplications and divisions and additions and other things William didn't enjoy. The teacher was right. It would indeed take most of the morning to work out the answer, if not most of the afternoon as well. Mr. Impossible whispered in William's ear. William put up his hand. "Yes, William," said the teacher. "Is there something about the sum you don't understand?" "Please, sir," said William, "is the answer 23? The teacher was absolutely, totally, completely amazed. "How did you work out the sum so quickly?" he gasped. "It's impossible." "Nothing is impossible," said Mr. Impossible from the back of the class and stood up. "Well, I never did," exclaimed the teacher. After that, Mr. Impossible spent all day at the school. He showed the teacher how he could read a book upside down. "That's impossible," said the children who were watching. "Absolutely," replied Mr. Impossible. Then William asked Mr. Impossible if he would like to play in the school football match. "Oh, yes, please," replied Mr. Impossible. "I've never played football before." And do you know what he did? He kicked the football so high into the air that when it came down, it had snow on it. What an impossible thing to do. Then it was time to go home. Mr. Impossible said goodbye to all the people at the school and then said goodbye to William. "Goodbye, Mr. Impossible," said William. "Goodbye, William," said Mr. Impossible, and just disappeared. William rubbed his eyes and went home. William's mother and father were waiting for him. "Hello, William," they said. "Did you have a good day at school?" "Yes," replied William, "and I met somebody who can do anything in the world." "Really, William?" They both laughed. "You're impossible." William smiled and went inside. And 100 miles away, a small figure was listening to what William's mother and father were saying. And he grinned an impossible grin, and then he went to sleep, standing on his head. And we all know that's impossible! I hope you'll join me for another story. Mr. Muddle by Roger Hargreaves. Poor Mr. Muddle just couldn't get anything right. Everything he did, everything he tried, everything he said was muddled. Totally, utterly, completely, absolutely muddled. Imagine, for instance, something as simple as hammering a nail into a wall. Now, what could get muddled with hammering a nail into a wall? Mr. Muddle could get it muddled, and frequently he did. Imagine, for instance, something as simple as putting on your coat. Now, what could get muddled with putting on your coat? Well, see for yourself. Only Mr. Muddle would put on his coat like that. Imagine, for instance, something as simple as going for a walk. Now, what could get muddled about going for a walk? Well, when your legs start walking one way and you start walking the other, that's a very muddly sort of walk. Poor Mr. Muddle walking one way and going another. Now, you'd probably like to know where Mr. Muddle lives. in a house by the sea near a place called Seatown. Mr. Muddle's house was supposed to be in the country, but Mr. Muddle, who built the house himself, had got the place muddled up. Of course. And you can tell that Mr. Muddle had built the house himself, can't you? This story starts one afternoon when Mr. Muddle was having breakfast. Yes, we know you don't have breakfast in the afternoon, but you do if you get your mealtimes muddled up. Mr. Muddle was having bread and butter and jam and a cup of tea with milk and sugar. He spread the butter on the table, then spread the jam on the plate, then poured the milk on the bread, then filled the cup with sugar, and then poured the tea on the bread. What a terrible, muddly, mixed-up breakfast. That afternoon, after breakfast, he went for a walk down to the beach near his house in order to work up an appetite for supper. He met an old fisherman called George, whom he knew quite well. "Good afternoon, Mr. Muddle," said George. "Good evening," replied Mr. Muddle. George smiled. "How would you like to come fishing with me?" he asked. "Oh, no, please," replied Mr. Muddle eagerly. "Help me push the boat out from the beach," called George. "Righto," said Mr. Muddle, and pulled the boat further up onto the beach. "Oh, Mr. Muddle," said George, and had to show Mr. Muddle the difference between pulling and pushing. However, eventually, somehow or other, they managed to get the boat out to sea. "Now let's fish," said George, dropping a fishing line over the side of the boat. "Righto," said Mr. Muddle, and dropped himself over the side of the boat. Splash! "Oh, Mr. Muddle," said George again. It wasn't any good, and they didn't catch any fish, and so they decided to go home before it became dark. "Help me pull the boat up onto the beach," called George. "Righto," said Mr. Muddle, and pushed the boat back into the water. George was just about to say, "Oh, Mr. Muddle," again, when he had an idea. He smiled to himself. "Help me push the boat out into the sea," George called. "Righto," said Mr. Muddle, and pulled the boat up onto the beach. "Well done, Mr. Muddle," said George. Mr. Muddle smiled a smile and went home. George smiled a smile and went to tell everybody. The following day, in Seatown, Mr. Brick the Builder asked Mr. Muddle to hold his coat for him. "Righto," said Mr. Muddle, and he held his ladder for him, which is what Mr. Brick really wanted. "Well done, Mr. Muddle," smiled Mr. Brick, who'd been talking to George. Mr. Muddle was very pleased. Then Mrs. Scrub at the laundry asked Mr. Muddle to pass her the soap. "Righto," said Mr. Muddle, and passed her a clothes peg, which is what Mrs. Scrub really wanted. "Well done, Mr. Muddle," smiled Mrs. Scrub, who'd also been talking to George. Mr. Muddle was extremely pleased. And then Mr. Black, the coalman, asked Mr. Muddle to lift a sack of coal down from his lorry. "Righto," said Mr. Muddle, and he lifted a sack of coal up onto the lorry, which is what Mr. Black really wanted all along. "Well done, Mr. Muddle," smiled Mr. Black. George had talked to everybody. Mr. Muddle was delighted. In fact, Mr. Muddle was so delighted he decided to go home and cook himself a large meal to celebrate. roast turkey and peas and potatoes and gravy. He put the turkey in the cupboard to cook. He peeled the peas. He put the potatoes in the refrigerator to boil. And then do you know what he did? He tried to slice the gravy. Oh, Mr. Muddle. I hope you'll join me for another story. Mr. Worry by Roger Hargreaves. Poor Mr. Worry. Whatever happened, he worried about it. If it rained, he worried that his roof was going to leak. If it didn't rain, he worried that all the plants in his garden were going to die. If he set off shopping, he worried that the shops would be shut when he got there. And when the shops weren't shut when he got there, he worried that he was spending too much money shopping. And when he got home with his shopping, he worried that he'd left something behind, or that something had fallen out of his basket on the way home. And when he got home and discovered that he hadn't left anything behind and that nothing had fallen out of his basket on the way home, he worried that he'd bought too much. And then he worried about where to put it all. Life was just one long worry for poor Mr. Worry. One day he went for a walk. He was worried that he might walk too far and not be able to get home. But on the other hand, he was worried that if he didn't walk far enough, he wouldn't get enough exercise. He hurried along worrying. Or you could say, he worried along hurrying. He met Mr. Bump. "I'm very worried about you," he said. "Why's that?" asked Mr. Bump. "I'm worried that one of these days you might hurt yourself," he said. "Don't worry your head about that," replied Mr. Bump, and went off, tripping over his own feet. Mr. Worry went on. He met Mr. Noisy. "I'm very worried about you," he said. "Why's that?" asked Mr. Noisy. "I'm worried that you might lose your voice," said Mr. Worry. "Don't you worry your head about that," said Mr. Noisy, and went off. Clump, clump, clump. Mr. Worry went on. He met Mr. Greedy. "I'm very worried about you," he said. "Why's that?" asked Mr. Greedy. "I'm worried that you might eat too much and be sick," explained Mr. Worry. "Me?" replied Mr. Greedy. "Eat too much? Impossible!" and went off for lunch. Mr. Worry went on. He met a wizard. "Hello," said the wizard. "Who are you?" "I'm Mr. Worry." "And you look it," commented the wizard. "Tell you what," he went on, for he was a helpful sort of wizard. "Why don't you go home and write down every single thing that you're worried about, and I'll make sure that none of these things ever happen." He smiled. "And then you won't have anything to worry about, will you?" Mr. Worry smiled. It was the first time he'd smiled in a long time. In fact, it was the first time he'd smiled that year. He hurried home in great excitement. When he got home, he sat down to write out all the things that worried him. Every single thing. It was a long list. And then he went to bed and had the best night's sleep he'd had in years. The following morning the wizard came round to collect Mr. Worry's list. "My goodness me," he said when he saw the size of it. "However," he said, "leave it with me. I'll go off and make sure that none of these things ever happen." And off he went. "Nothing to worry about now," he called over his shoulder. "Nothing at all." Mr. Worry heaved a sigh of relief. That day was the first day in Mr. Worry's life that he didn't have a single thing to worry about. And the next day, and the day after, and the day after that. On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, Mr. Worry didn't have a care in the world. But on Monday morning, he was a worried man. Oh dear, what do you think was worrying him? Can you guess? He went to see the wizard. "Oh dear," said the wizard when he saw him standing on his doorstep. "What's worrying you?" "I'll tell you," said Mr. Worry. "I'm worried because I don't have anything to worry about." And he went home to worry about not having anything to worry about. I hope you'll join me for another story. Cheerful by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Cheerful always woke up in a cheerful mood, with a bright sunny smile on his face. In fact, Mr. Cheerful was one of the most cheerful people you are ever likely to meet. He did, however, have one secret that made him sad, but nobody knew about it. Not yet, anyway. All I can tell you is that he liked to keep it under his hat. Mr. Cheerful was never without a smile, from breakfast time in the morning to his bath time at night. Mr. Cheerful beamed from ear to ear. He was even happy when it rained. On a sunny day, his smile was even brighter and sunnier than the sun. Everybody around him couldn't help but feel cheerful. Even the flowers smiled when Mr. Cheerful walked past. When Mr. Funny met him, he felt so happy that he pulled an even funnier face than usual, making Mr. Cheerful laugh out loud. Then one day, while out for a walk, Mr. Cheerful bumped into little Miss Splendid. Mr. Cheerful smiled his usual cheerful smile. Little Miss Splendid began to smile, but then she stopped and looked sternly at Mr. Cheerful. "How rude!" she exclaimed. "Young man, don't you know that you should raise your hat when you meet a lady?" For the first time in his life, Mr. Cheerful lost his smile, and then he blushed bright red. But he still did not raise his hat. "You should be ashamed of yourself," cried little Miss Splendid. "Why won't you raise your hat?" "I'm too embarrassed," replied Mr. Cheerful, blushing an even brighter red. "Without my hat on, I'm not very good looking, and that makes me sad." "Really?" asked little Miss Splendid. "Let me see." Mr. Cheerful lifted his hat, and now I'll tell you what his secret was. Mr. Cheerful had the grand total of only 3 hairs on his head. "Is that
all you're worried about?" asked Little Miss Splendid. "Why, it's your bright, sunny smile that everybody loves, not how many hairs you have on your head." And Little Miss Splendid smiled. Then Mr. Cheerful smiled. Ever since the day, he hasn't stopped smiling, and he is always quick to raise his hat to everyone he meets. And everyone he meets goes away feeling happy and cheerful, which leaves only one thing left to say. Hats off to Mr. Cheerful. I hope you'll join me for another story. Mr. Rude by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Rude is rude. He is very rude. He is very, very rude. In fact, he is worse than very, very rude. He is extraordinarily rude. When you meet somebody, you might think to yourself that the person has a large nose, but you wouldn't say anything to them, would you? Because that would be rude, wouldn't it? Well, Mr. Rude would just blurt it out, "Big nose!" But he wouldn't stop there. Oh no, not Mr. Rude. With a nose like that, you could vacuum the floor. Can you imagine saying that to someone? Well, I hope you can't. And he was the same with everyone. If he met someone overweight, he would shout, "Fatty, you're supposed to take the food out of the fridge, not eat the fridge as well." If he was driving along in his car, he would yell rude things at the people he passed. Mr. Rude was a horrible man who didn't have a nice thing to say to anyone, and not surprisingly, no one liked him. One day, Mr. Rude met little Miss Tiny. Well, not so much met as nearly trod on her. "Good morning," said little Miss Tiny. "Look at the size of you," exclaimed Mr. Rude. "Squirt! You're so tiny I could squash you under my thumb." Poor little Miss Tiny burst into tears and ran home. Behind a tree on the other side of the street, Mr. Happy looked anything but happy. He had heard everything. The next morning, Mr. Happy was outside Mr. Rude's house, suitcase in hand. Mr. Happy knocked on Mr. Rude's front door. "Go away!" shouted Mr. Rude. Mr. Happy knocked again. Mr. Rude opened the door. "Can't you read?" said Mr. Rude, pointing to his doormat. Mr. Rude's doormat did not say welcome like everyone else's doormat. Mr. Rude had crossed that out and then in large black letters had written "Go away" underneath. Mr. Happy smiled, barged past Mr. Rude and went into the living room. "Get out!" shouted Mr. Rude. Mr. Happy smiled an even larger smile and sat down in the armchair. Mr. Rude exploded. He ranted and raged for half an hour, but Mr. Happy calmly sat through it all, smiling. Eventually, Mr. Rude went into the kitchen to make himself supper, without offering any to Mr. Happy. After his supper, Mr. Rude ranted and raged for a full hour, but whatever Mr. Rude called him, Mr. Happy took no notice. Finally, Mr. Rude turned out the lights and went upstairs without offering Mr. Happy a bed for the night. When he came down in the morning, Mr. Happy was still there, still smiling. "Okay, I give in," cried Mr. Rude. "What do you want?" "Breakfast would be nice," said Mr. Happy. "Please." Mr. Rude made breakfast for him. It was the first time in Mr. Rude's life that he had ever done anything for somebody else. In fact, it was the first time he had ever asked anybody what they wanted. "Thank you," said Mr. Happy when he had finished. "Right, you can go now," demanded Mr. Rude. But Mr. Happy did not budge. Mr. Rude ranted and raged and raged and ranted, but he ended up making lunch for Mr. Happy. And supper too. He even offered Mr. Happy a bed that night. Mr. Happy stayed for a fortnight. Slowly, the ranting and raging became less and less. Mr. Rude discovered that he had something that he had never known he possessed. Manners. When it was time for Mr. Happy to leave, he shook Mr. Rude's hands and said, "Thank you so much, Mr. Rude. I really enjoyed my stay." Mr. Rude beamed a smile that was every bit as wide as Mr. Happy's and found himself saying, "And so did I." Mr. Rude was a changed man. "Burp," belched Mr. Rude. "Well, almost." I hope you'll join me for another story. Mr. Cool by Roger Hargreaves. Poor Andy Robinson wasn't feeling well. He had been in bed for days and he had to stay in bed until he was better. "I'm bored," he huffed. "I wish I could go outside and play with my friends." Suddenly, a blue blur shot in through the window. It looped the loop around the light in the ceiling and a small blue figure wearing a hat landed on the end of Andy's bed. "Cool," said Andy. "That's me, Mr. Cool," said Mr. Cool. "Cool," repeated Andy. "You look a bit bored," said Mr. Cool. "I thought we could go and have some fun." "I wish I could," said Andy, "but I'm not allowed out of bed." "I think we could make an exception just this once," said Mr. Cool, and he clicked his fingers. The next instant, Andy found himself sitting in the cockpit of a jet plane. "Why don't you take it out for a spin?" suggested Mr. Cool. "What? Can I really fly it?" asked Andy. "Sure you can," said Mr. Cool. "It's easy." So Andy flew the jet plane across the Pacific Ocean and back. "That was cool," cried Andy when they were back on the ground. "Thanks, Mr. Cool." "We haven't finished yet," said Mr. Cool, and he clicked his fingers again. Andy heard a crowd roar. He was at the soccer ground, but he wasn't sitting in the crowd. He was on the bench with the other players, and he was wearing the team colour. "Quick," said Mr. Cool, "the coach wants you to go on." "He wants me to play," said Andy in disbelief. "But they're the number one team." And you'll never guess what? Andy scored the winning goal. "Wow, that was so cool," said Andy. As Andy walked off the pitch, Mr. Cool clicked his fingers and whisked them away again. to climb the tallest tree in the world. He clicked his fingers again, and before you could say Andy Robinson, they were standing on top of a mountain. Where are we? Called Andy over the noise of the howling wind. Mount Everest, said Mr. Cool. How cool! What are we doing here? Shouted Andy. Sledging, said Mr. Cool. Let's go. Andy and Mr. Cool slid from the very top to the very bottom of Mount Everest. That was the coolest thing ever, cried Andy. It was more like the coldest, shouted Mr. Cool. Mr. Cool clicked his fingers for the final time that day. In an instant, Andy found himself back in his bedroom. Thank you so much, Mr. Cool, said Andy. That was amazing, laughed Mr. Cool. Well, I'll be off, said Mr. Cool. But there's one more thing, Andy. Have a look in the mirror. With this, Mr. Cool shot out through the window. Andy went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. Cool, said Andy when he saw himself. And why do you think he was so pleased? That's right, all his spots had gone. Andy was better. I wonder on which page did Andy get better? I hope you'll join me for another story.